Why am I here? Why do I care? Why is a man involved on this issue? Well, it's because of a woman I know. This woman had come from another country with her husband and two young sons, like so many other immigrant families, to pursue a better way of life here in America, only to find herself and her children terrorized by the oppression of domestic violence and child abuse that took place on a level of torture in their home. For 15 years, after giving birth to 3 more children and carrying the burden of cooking, cleaning, childcare, and a full-time job at a factory, this woman also endured the physical, psychological, and spiritual wounding at the hands of her husband. Until one day, when she set off on foot to the local laundromat, pulling her family's many loads of laundry behind her in a cart. That woman didn't return home that day. On the way there, she collapsed in the street, and she was rushed to a hospital where doctors determined that she was so close to death, they told her she was in God's hands. That woman remained in the hospital for 2 weeks as a Jane Doe because she was too frightened to give her real name for fear of the punishment she would receive if she did live. And back home, her children had no idea where the mother was. And the 2 oldest sons thought that maybe the father had finally killed her and that she was never coming home. Well, fortunately, this woman did survive her collapse. But upon returning to the household, the domestic violence only increased. I also speak because of a boy I know. This boy went to his city's police department, and he took off all his clothes in front of a room full of police officers. And as the boy stood there naked, the officers were horrified that this boy's body was covered in bruises, welts, and burns. The boy told the police, "My father's doing this to me, to my siblings, and to my mom." And then he pleaded with him. He said, "Please go to my house and arrest him and get him out of there for good." What the police said they could do was to have the boy sign a formal complaint, and they would put him in the car and drive him back to the house to talk to the father. The boy said, "You don't seem to understand. If I do that and you don't arrest him, when you leave, he's going to kill me." The police said there was nothing more they could do, that it was a private family matter. The year was 1967, and that boy at the police station was me. And that woman who collapsed on the street, that was my mother. That nightmare that began as early as I can remember was life for me, for my siblings, and for my mother. I don't know half of the brutality that my mother endured, but I can assure you that I heard and I saw plenty. As a child, I was beaten, I was tied up, I was locked in closets, I was hammered, I was burned, to name a few. So why doesn't the woman just leave? Because you see, often when they do, her and her children are often in the gravest danger of being killed by their abuser. And you have to remember, in our case, this was over 40 years ago, where there were no hotlines or shelters or community services as we have today. And without a safety plan, without the resources that you have before you in this piece of legislation, families like mine have nowhere to turn. That's why I care. That's why I'm here to ask for your support and to ask you to care too.